Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every single week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But before I get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about. And the first one here is that we do have a new edition of TIKAL Announcement, and this one's going to be launching sometime in October. But this one is going to be a brand new game built on the system that TIKAL pioneered. And if you're not familiar with that game, it's essentially a tile placement area control game where every turn you're going to be placing a tile out on the board, changing the landscape of the board, but then you're going to have different explorers. You're going to be spending action points in order to move those explorers around, build up camps and build different temples, and try to control those temples in order to score victory points at the end of the game. Like I said, this version is going to be building upon that system, creating a brand new game that does incorporate a lot of those elements, but of course it's going to have a lot nicer artwork and components as well, because this one is going to offer a deluxified edition. Of course, I will cover this one in more detail during the week of its launch, so if this one does interest you, make sure to subscribe down below and I'll let you know all about it when it launches in October. Other than that, I did want to offer a quick PSA for anyone that's interested in the different promos that are offered from CMON that are now very difficult to get because these were only offered at certain conventions, and now they're going for upwards of $200 or $300 on eBay or the secondhand market. And I just want to let you know that CMON is planning to make these more available in one form or another. I don't know exactly how they're going to go about doing that, but if you're interested in this promo or any others that they've been offering recently, I would just hold off until there's more information rather than paying these exorbitant prices. And the last thing I want to mention before we get started here is that there was a campaign that I missed last week, and I normally don't go back and cover campaigns that I've missed because I just don't have capacity for it, but I was coordinating with the creators of this campaign and I did know about it well before it actually launched. They just didn't give me very much notice when it actually did launch, so I'm just going to give a quick mention to it now since I didn't get the chance to do it last week. And this one's a solo or two-player game where you're trying to build a sustainable hive by getting the health of your hive to a certain value, but you do lose the game if the health of your hive drops down to 0. And this one does look like a lot of fun, and it is a roll and write, and it's also a print and play, which means that you can get it at a very reasonable price. But the artwork looks fantastic here, and I do like what I'm seeing with the mechanisms. And the way that this game works is that you're essentially going to be rolling dice equal to your current bee population, and each of your dice are going to represent a different worker bee. You'll be able to upgrade your bees into the different types of workers to make them more proficient, but you're essentially going to be spending those dice depending on the values that you rolled in order to do different things like nurture your larva in order to increase your population, send some of your bees out into the world to increase the overall health of your hive but losing that amount of population, or gather nectar, which you can use in a variety of ways like increasing the overall health of your hive or increasing your population or even upgrading some of those worker bees. But of course, the more bees that you have, the more that you'll have to maintain, and you will have to feed your bees. And at the end of a round, you're going to be looking at your rolled dice and then checking how many of each value you can actually sustain within your hive based on what you've upgraded so far. And anything that you don't have space for, you're going to have to get rid of, leaving you with less dice for the following round. There's also seasonal effects that can come into play and a bit of pattern building as you're coloring in your hive that you'll want to take advantage of. There's also a bunch of different variants and ways to play the game and multiple difficulties as well, so if you are interested in this one, feel free to check it out and I will have it linked in the description down below. If you've been consistently watching these videos, well, thank you so much, but also you've probably noticed that the amount of games has slowed down, and that's usually how it goes over the summer months, but then things get really crazy in September, so if you're looking to spend a ton of money, just wait for next month because I'm sure things will ramp up. But my point here is that I don't have a crazy amount of games to cover. There still are some really, really good ones that you'll want to check out. But if you do want to find out about even more games, I do recommend checking out Boardgame Co. because he posts all sorts of content related to crowdfunding and what's going on in the industry. And I will have him linked down below along with Michael from Zillow Blitz, who you'll definitely want to check out if you're a fan of historical war games, which is a genre that I don't cover in near as much detail, and he has a lot more sources than I do. Or if you're interested to see what's upcoming with retail games, I definitely recommend Grant Lyon. He's a great guy and he has a great channel as well. So all of them will be linked down below. Definitely show them some love if you do like their content. But that's it for an intro. Let's start with the campaigns. And the first campaign we have launches on August 19th, and this one is called Minecart Town. And this one is a reimplementation of their previous game, which was called My Trolley Town. And I did take a look at the differences between these two games, and I think they've made some pretty significant improvements. First of all, the artwork is completely redone, making this version a lot prettier than that original game. But they've also completely revamped the rules, not only streamlining the game, but also reducing the setup and teardown time. They've also added a solo mode for anyone that's interested in that, and also a hard mode that can be played by any of the players that are a little bit more experienced with the game. And you are able to have some players playing on the hard mode and some players playing on the easier mode. And I personally think that this game looks like a lot of fun, and it's also super easy to get to the table and teach to other people. And for those reasons, this one is my own personal pick of the week. And the way that you play this game is that each of the players are essentially trying to build up their little town made up of buildings and tracks, where players are going to be generating resources from those buildings and then using those tracks to move them to other buildings, where you might convert them into other resources, which you might then be able to convert into victory points. Something I really like about the resources in this game is that you are essentially trying to convert those into victory points at some point in order to try and win the game, but you're also going to be using those various resources in order to buy more tiles. So it is going to be a bit of a trade-off when you're deciding to try and convert those into victory points or convert those into certain resources so you can buy the tiles that you think will set you up best for the following rounds. But as I mentioned, some of these tiles are going to be generating new resources while others convert them into other things. But in order to get those resources from one tile to another, they do need to be connected with a rail. Players only start with 2 resource generation tiles at the start of the game, which is going to be producing both wood and stone, and then players are going to be using those resources to first purchase more tiles and railroads in order to expand their city. Every round is going to be going through a production phase where your production generating tiles are going to be generating their resources. Then you'll be able to spend those resources to build tiles in order to add more production tiles, more tracks, more resource conversion tiles, or even special tiles that might allow you to teleport goods to other areas of your town, reduce building costs of certain buildings, or even just score you outright victory points for having that tile. Of course, you may not want to spend all your resources because you then move into the transportation phase, and any of the resources that you still have on your tiles, you'll be able to move along the tracks to the other buildings in order to take their associated actions. This usually involves processing those goods into other goods or into additional actions, or of course, victory points, which you're trying to get in order to win the game. The game continues like this over 4 rounds, with each round having new tiles drawn and put into the display that players are going to be able to purchase. And the player with the most victory points at the end of the 4 rounds wins the game. And if you're interested in this one, definitely check it out, and I'll have it linked in the description down below. And launching on August 20th, we have Zombie Horde, and this is a cooperative game where players are trying to survive in a zombie apocalypse. And I did cover this one a few weeks back, but it got postponed until now. So rather than going into this one again, I'll just roll that previous footage for you now. And this is a cooperative game where players are going to be in a post-apocalyptic world where they're trying to work together to fight back against the zombie horde and hopefully find a cure. I couldn't find a whole lot of info on this game, but it does come from a designer and publisher that created a whole bunch of really excellent games, especially one that I was really interested in, which is Neomorphosis, which I thought had a really excellent design as well as a lot of very unique ideas as well. And I think this game will do the same. It does follow that same style of gameplay that you might find in a lot of other cooperative monster, horde, or zombie games, where you're going to be alternating back and forth between the players and the zombies, with the players getting 3 actions each on their turn, and then resolving some cards to determine how the zombie horde reacts. But what makes this one a little bit different is that there is going to be a colony phase as well, and I think what that means is that players are going to spend some time back at their colony using different items that they might have found throughout the game in order to craft and create different gear and resources. That really does bring in an element of survival into this game that I think is a really interesting idea. With this in mind, I feel like this one is taking more of a realistic approach to a zombie apocalypse, so if you are interested in that, I will have this linked in the description below, and of course you can click that notify me button to get notified once it launches. Also on the 20th, we have Scarce, and this one is another really interesting one that can be played both competitively and cooperatively. This one takes place in a post-apocalyptic flooded world where humanity is surviving on floating cities. Of course, in order to actually have a sustainable city, you do need to have your own source of power, and players are going to be working together to try and build a power plant in order to power their city. And if playing in the competitive mode, you're going to be gaining a certain amount of points depending on your contributions towards that power plant, in addition to some other sneaky ways where you can also gain victory points. The power plant is going to be represented by this board that's populated with a bunch of different mission cards that will be randomized from game to game. and players will be trying to complete those mission cards by gathering and delivering different resources, but then also gaining points for contributing uranium in the bottom of the track here, or contributing any of your own power that you were able to generate on your own personal ship. And this is a really neat aspect of the game because each player is going to have their own ship that starts with just the single board at the top here, and you'll be able to purchase upgrades as you play the game in order to extend your ship with different modules that add additional locations for you to store resources, store crew, or store different types of abilities. But the fun doesn't stop there because the ship is also amphibious, and you're going to be gathering resources from both above and below the surface, and the game offers a multi-dimensional board where players are going to be navigating their ships and then diving down to the lower board whenever they submerge into the ocean. What's also nice about this is that you don't have to set it up this way if you do find it a little bit more fiddly or difficult to reach around the table. The game was also designed to be played flat, which works just as well, but of course doesn't look nearly as cool. But each player starts the game with a captain card, which is going to give them some sort of special ability, but then also a deck of starter cards, which they're going to be using to take various actions throughout the game. At the start of your turn, you're going to be drawing 4 more cards into your hand, and they're going to be taking actions either from your captain card, from the crew tiles out on your board, or even from completed mission cards. And only after you've done any of those actions will you be able to play the actions from your cards. And what's neat about these cards is they're actually multi-use, and there's 3 different ways that you can use them. You can either use them for the movement amount that's depicted on the top of the card, and there's going to be an amount of movement for if you're on the surface of the ocean, an amount of movement if you are submerged. Whenever you do this, you're going to be moving your ship out on the board up to that many movement points and then gaining the benefit of whatever location you have stopped on. At the start of the game, there's going to be a bunch of different tokens that are put out on the various hexes out on the board. These can do things like gain you additional energy for your ship or resources, or even give you minerals that are required for the power plant mission cards. The minerals are a bit of a special token because you're not able to just take them as soon as you stop on them, and you will have to take a harvest action either from one of the abilities from your shipboard or by using one of your other cards. But whenever you are able to take one of these tokens, you'll get the benefit that's depicted on the top of it, and then you'll also flip it to its opposite side, which will give you some sort of unknown benefit. Not only that, but you also get to keep the token, which is worth a victory point at the end of the game. Of course, rather than movement, you could just spend one of these cards in order to take the associated ability that's outlined on that card, with a lot of these requiring you to spend some amount of energy or resources from your ship. But the final thing you can do with these cards is to just take a basic action, and you can discard any card to be able to do this, and that's going to allow you to either dive, surface, or upgrade your ship, or contribute minerals to one of those mission cards. If you have any cards left over after you've taken all the actions that you're able to, you are allowed to hang on to 2 of those cards and carry them forward into the next round, so there is sometimes a reason not to spend a card if you think it will be more useful in the future. One thing to note about the multi-level board here is that the tokens on the ocean floor normally are a lot nicer than the ones on the surface, but they are also more dangerous to get access to. If you ever start your turn while you're submerged, you're going to have to draw an encounter card, and that's going to require you to discard some amount of resources in order to win against whatever encounter you happen to run into. This will also gain you some sort of benefit, so it's not all bad, but if you're not able to meet the requirements of that encounter, then it's going to have some sort of negative consequence. The game continues like this over a series of rounds with different in-game events causing the time tracker to move forward, and once it reaches the end of the track, it's going to be the player with the most victory points that wins the game. You're going to be gaining 10 victory points for any of the mission cards that you were able to complete, as well as gaining additional victory points for any of your contributed resources to the power plant. Then you'll also gain victory points outlined on any of the cards that you're able to purchase, and finally from the tokens that you were able to collect. In the cooperative version of this game, there's going to be another city that's moving in to try and overtake your city. And they're going to have different units that they're going to be deploying out on the board, occupying different spaces and causing trouble for the players. And of course, the players are going to be trying to complete their power plant before that city catches up with them. But not only that, the players will have to sustain their city along the way, and there's going to be different points in the game where you're going to have to each contribute some amount of resources, and if any player is not able to do that, then that is another way to instantly lose the game. But if you're able to keep that city supplied while also completing that power plant, then the players win the game, and if you are interested to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. Also on the 20th, we have the second printing of Leviathan Leviathan Wilds, which is a solo or cooperative game where players are going to be climbing on 2 giant beasts in order to try and take them down. Along with the second printing, there is going to be a new expansion as well that's going to be adding 7 new Leviathans, a new character, and 1 new class into the game. And if you're not familiar with how the original game played, I did cover this one back when it originally launched, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. This is a cooperative game that takes place in a world with friendly colossal beings, but unfortunately these beings are being corrupted, which is making them very aggressive, and it's up to you and your team in order to free them. And the game's going to offer a whole bunch of different Leviathans provided in a spiral booklet, and there's going to be about 20 different Leviathans for players to go up against, each of them playing very different from each other, offering a different difficulty, coming in different shapes and sizes, and also coming with their own unique Leviathan deck. And players are going to be climbing and trying to reach different areas of the Leviathan to try and destroy the crystals that are corrupting them. But the Leviathan will retaliate at the end of each round, potentially damaging players or knocking them down to a lower area on the board. And the more that you climb around on them, the more that they will get agitated, so their threat level will be increasing throughout the game, making the retaliations even more deadly. And the first thing that happens each round is that you're going to be revealing the next card in the Leviathan deck. And each card has a few different actions on it that correspond to different threat levels throughout the game, and the action that matches the Leviathan's current threat level is the one that will get activated at the end of the round. And with that information, the players will know how the Leviathan will retaliate at the end of the round, giving the players some time to adjust their positioning or prepare for that incoming retaliation. Players will then take turns using cards in their hand, and the cards that they have will have an action point value as well as a special ability, and these are dual use cards, and you'll be able to choose which of those that you want to use. But at this point in the game, you're going to be using them for their action points, and you'll be spending those action points to perform different movements like climbing, descending, or jumping to different areas on the board. Or you can also use those action points to rest, which will refresh your deck of cards, putting your discarded cards back into your hand, because your cards also kind of act like your endurance, and if you ever run out of cards, you're going to be losing grip on the Leviathan and fall into a lower area of the board. But the catch here is that you can't rest wherever you want. You have to be at a spot where it's safe to rest, so you're going to have to make sure you have enough cards to get there before you're able to take that action. But the other actions you can perform are to heal some of your wounds, damage the crystals, or gather cubes in order to level up your character. But for any of the cards that you're not using for its action points, you can instead use its special ability, and you can do this at any point on any player's turn, and you can even use that card to help other players. I really like this because it adds more player interaction and encourages players to work together to get the most out of their actions. But of course, also doing this is going to make you run out of cards quicker, so you really want to be careful when you're using your cards. After all the players have played all the cards that they want, you're going to draw back up to a hand size of 5 cards, and then you can also level up your character by spending the cubes that you've collected so far. And then at the very end of the round, that retaliation card that we drew at the start of the round is going to get activated and affect any characters that get caught in the way. And then the rounds continue like this until either the players have destroyed all the crystals, freeing the Leviathan from its corruption, or if a player gets so exhausted that they can no longer go on, then that's going to trigger the last round of the game, and players will have that final round in order to try and save the Leviathan. And there's a really neat aspect in this game that causes players to get exhausted that I haven't talked about yet, and that is the way that the health track and the exhaustion track work together, because they're actually the same track. This track will actually have 2 cubes on it. One represents your health and one represents your exhaustion. And as you lose health, you're going to be moving that token over to the right, but then as you gain exhaustion, you're going to be moving the exhaustion token to the left. And if those 2 tokens ever overlap on each other, then that player is going to trigger the final round of the game. And as always, you can find links to this and all the other campaigns in the description below. Also on the 20th, we have another campaign that I'm super interested in, and this one is for the game Norsemen. And this one's a competitive game where the board's going to be set up with a bunch of different cards in the different areas of the board representing different countries in Europe. And there's also going to be a bunch of gold cards that players are going to be racing to try and complete for victory points at the end of the game. But what makes this one so interesting to me is that this one is a push-your-luck deck building game that incorporates a little bit of engine building and does offer a bit of asymmetry between the players, because each player is going to be starting with a starter deck, a few resources, and some ships, as well as their own leader card, which is going to give them a unique special ability, and it's also going to determine what sort of starting resources that you get or presence out on the board. Each player also has their own player board that has a bunch of different units and buildings that they'll be able to deploy out on the board if they're able to build them. And this is how you gain presence and build that engine, because each one of these is going to give you some sort of resource or money generation or some sort of special ability that you'll be able to use if you are able to build it out on one of the regions of the board. But the way this game works is that it's going to be playing over a series of rounds where at the start of each round, players are going to be drawing from their own personal deck and drawing up to 8 different cards, with each of those cards granting you with a action, some resources, as well as access to one of the countries out on the board. A lot of the actions on these cards do also require you to have revealed a certain amount of resources in order to be able to take that action, which basically means that you're going to want to draw as many of these cards as possible so you have the most options for actions, but then also that you're drawing enough resources in order to take those actions. The different actions will often allow you to build buildings in any of the regions that you were able to draw a card for. And like I said, each building does have a different effect. They can either gain you resources or gold every round that you have that building out, or they can gain you victory points, or even gain you access to a region even when you don't draw that card. And there are also the Jarls that you're able to put out, which have a special ability that can vary depending on where and how you put them out. But like I said, this is a push your luck game, so of course there's going to be some sort of catch here, and you might have noticed these red skulls on some of these cards. The way that these work is that as soon as you draw 2 of these, your ships are going to be starting to take damage. Your ships are one of your units that you're going to be putting out onto the board in order to generate resources, so these are very valuable to you. And anytime that a ship takes damage, it's going to be coming back to your board from wherever it was from, and you're not going to have access to it until you're able to repair it, which is one of the actions offered on these cards. Some of the other actions might allow you to do things like purchase more cards in order to improve your deck and gain additional abilities, deploy leaders by placing them out on the different regions to perform various actions, or expand your fleet by unlocking different buildings and ships out on your board, and then using them to gain those various benefits. I personally think this one looks like a lot of fun, and if you think so as well, you'll definitely want to follow along with it in order to get a free leaders pack added to your pledge. But if you do want to check out the campaign, I will have it linked down below. And like I said, you can follow along to get notified once it launches. And launching on August 23rd, we have Rift Zone Contact, which is a sci-fi miniatures wargame in space. And this one is a campaign that I did cover a couple weeks back, but it got pushed back until now. So if you missed that coverage, I'll just go ahead and roll that for you now. And I'm going to go through this one pretty quickly because I don't spend quite as much time on the miniature war games. But this one is called Rift Zone Contact, and this is a miniature Starship Trooper-esque war game where you're going to be playing as humans versus bugs. Players are going to be taking turns activating just one of their units at a time until all of their units have been activated. And whenever you activate a unit, you can move it and then spend any of its action points. The movement will differ per unit as well as the action points available, but the interesting thing about the action points is you can spend them to attack, and the accuracy and damage is based on the distance, and damage type and armor can be a factor as well, and there can also be some special effects. But then you can also spend your action points on special abilities for extra movement, to repair damage, or even add defensive capabilities. But any unused action points actually roll over into the next round, or they can be used as defensive action points that you can use anytime that you're attacked out of your turn. One thing that makes this one very different from a lot of other war games is that each of the units actually have an RFID chip in them, and you'll be able to scan them with your app in order to get their stats. And this is also going to track your units as you upgrade them and make different changes and configurations across multiple games. So you're not going to be using the app too heavily within a game, but it is used in order to track the progress of the individual units. And that's it for this week, but don't leave yet because we still do have a couple awesome giveaways to announce. And the first one we have is for a pledge for one deck dungeon, Relics of the Forge. If you're not familiar with this game, this is a solo or cooperative game where you're going to be going through a deck of cards multiple times trying to get through a dungeon and fight the final boss. What's cool about this is that for every card you face, you'll be able to add that card to your character in order to upgrade your character in one of 4 different ways. You are going to be using dice rolling in order to engage in combat, and your different stats represent the different dice that you'll have access to. You're going to be trying to cover up different areas of the different enemies that you run into by rolling values higher than the amount outlined on the card, but then also matching the color of the die. Of course, you have a bunch of different abilities and items that you'll be able to use to your advantage and augment your rolls in different ways, gaining more of those as the game goes on to try and give you even more options. The new expansion is going to add a bunch of new cards, including characters and enemies, but the big change here is that it's also going to introduce relics. And the way that these work is that you're going to be choosing one in addition to your character, and then you're going to be going into the dungeon with that single relic, powering it up by discarding certain dice in order to unlock its abilities. This adds a fun little trade-off that if you use properly, you'll be able to take advantage to help you get through those different levels. And this giveaway is a really nice one because this is for the Vault Pledge, which is going to include everything that has been released for One Deck Dungeon, including the base game, Forest of Shadows, Relics of the Forge, and the Abysmal Trove. This one's also offered worldwide, so anyone can feel free to enter in on this one. And to enter in on this giveaway, all you gotta do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag dungeon. And you can say anything that you want, but if you're looking for something in specific, maybe you let us know which relic you would take with you into a dungeon. For myself, I'd definitely take the portable hole from D&D because going through a dungeon is stressful and I might want to just keep a beer fridge in there or something. But I'm interested to hear what else you guys are able to come up with and see if something can make me regret my decision. But the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for Gnome Village, and this one is a competitive game where players are each building up their little village, with each tile that you put in that village gaining you access to some sort of new action. Some tiles might require you to have certain other tiles in your village already in order to purchase them, and of course to add more gnomes into your village you do need more houses. You're going to be using those tiles to gain money and then take various actions in order to build even more tiles, but each time that you use a tile it's going to get exhausted to its inactive side, and at the end of each round you're going to be able to move your various gnomes to any of the locations that you've built in order to reactivate that tile for the following round. You can also build all sorts of business tiles that gain you access to all sorts of special abilities if you leave your gnome on one of those tiles at the end of the round. And this opens up the door for a bunch of different types of player interaction and generating money and performing some sneaky special abilities to help you get a little further in the game. I want to thank the publisher for this one because this is another one that is offered worldwide, so anyone can feel free to enter in on this one. And to enter in on this giveaway, same thing as before, just leave a comment down below. Once again, you can leave any comment that you like, but if you're looking for something in specific, maybe you could let us know what the gnomes might steal or leave in your backyard. For myself, I am actually a bit of a gardener, and this year my garden was just decimated by all the different animals, so I've put up fences all over the place to keep them out. But one day I was looking out and I just kept seeing birds with strawberries, which I thought was weird because I didn't plant any strawberries. But then when I was clearing the weeds out from underneath a spruce tree in my backyard, I found out that the entire base of that tree was covered in wild strawberries. They were all gone, but the plants were still there, and I like to think it was the gnomes who did that. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winner for last week's giveaway, which was for a pledge for Legacy at Sea. And this one was actually already drawn, and a subscriber on my Ko-fi actually ended up winning, and if you are interested to help support the channel, you can find that in the link down below. But rather than accepting the prize themselves, they wanted to redraw it for one of the viewers here, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So I've already entered in the YouTube video link. So let's go ahead and draw those comments, and draw a winner. And the winner is Eric Stockwell 1540. And they say that Legacy of Sea looks like an intriguing pirate game, but they love the look of Gnome Village as well. Congrats on the win here, and I just want to thank the previous winner for offering this one up again for someone else to enjoy. But of course, feel free to enter in this week's giveaway, and you might get yourself a copy of Gnome Village as well. Just email me at adam@shelfclutter.com, and we'll get that pledge all sorted out for you. And that's everything this week. Like I said, it is a shorter week, but still a couple games here that I'm really interested in. I hope there's something in there for you as well. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full. What?